How do you choose the main type of activity for a company? There seem to be some issues with certain types of activities. Do these issues really exist, or is it just a myth? Let's take a look and figure it out. First, a bit of theory. In Montenegro, they distinguish between a main type of activity and additional types of activity. In our charters, all types of activities are listed, except for those that cannot be included until permission is obtained from the relevant authority. These are major types of activities, such as education, banking, and insurance companies. In other words, things that most of you probably don't need anyway. All the other types are included there. At the same time, in addition to the general list of activities, a main type of activity is also specified. There can only be one. It is assumed that the company will operate according to this main type of activity. That is, the company can be multi-profile and engage in other additional types of activities, but the main one must always be present. The main type of activity is specified in the registration decision and in some other documents, and our local banks don't like certain types of activities. Why is that? It's because, well, there is an ongoing fight against money laundering here. It didn't start today or yesterday. It's been going on for a long time and is gradually becoming more and more serious. In short, banks undergo inspections by the central bank, and they are especially prejudiced toward companies with certain types of activities that could potentially be involved in money laundering. That is to say, they check them more thoroughly and more frequently. Naturally, banks don't want this, so some banks try to reduce the number of such companies they serve. They don't close the accounts of existing clients, but they don't want to take on new ones. That is, if a company is engaged in one of these prohibited types of activities, what is the reason for this? For example, let's say trade. In trade, it's quite difficult to launder money because in order to receive money, you have to sell something. And in order to sell something, you have to buy something. In short, it all comes down to this kind of accounting. And everything is fairly transparent. Here I bought a product, here I sold the product. So there are no questions for them here. It's the same, for example, in the food service industry where everything is clear there as well. Here, your employees receive their salaries, you buy goods, prepare dishes from these purchased products, and sell these dishes. In short, everything is transparent here as well. But there are many types of activities where if someone wanted or not that the founders necessarily have such intention, but if they did, they could commit certain offenses. For example, sell 2 tons of heroin in transit to Spain and then launder the money through these kinds of activities. And in our banks, they came up with the idea that consulting services are well suited for this. That is, you issue someone an invoice for consulting services. It's unclear whether you actually provided those services or not. Maybe you're laundering money. Programming also falls under this category. In short, anything related to remote business consulting, programming, some kind of information security, various information services, even real estate got lumped in here. So, for example, real estate agencies. Not all banks will open accounts for them. In other words, banks are basically just making things easier for themselves. As I understand it, there is no official ban from the central bank. It's just that, as they say in private conversations, if they have such companies on their books, they get audited more often and they don't like these inspections. Well, that's understandable. Nobody likes inspections, so they just try to make things easier for themselves and refuse to work with a certain number of clients whose, let's say, appearance doesn't really please the central bank. Is this a problem or not? At the same time, both yes and no. The thing is, most of the banks in Montenegro, there are actually quite a few banks in the country. I don't know exactly how many, maybe 15 or 20, but there are a fair number. For such a small country, that's not so few. But you won't go to most of these banks. Why? Because some banks like CKB, NLB, and Adikodo not open accounts for Russians, so it's pointless to go there. They'll simply say, you have a Russian passport, we don't work with Russian. Goodbye. There are also some other banks, for example, Hipotekarna and Erste, which in theory open accounts for everyone, but in practice it's very difficult for foreigners to open an account there. But for example, Hipotekarna, they generally do not refuse to open accounts. In fact, they're even willing to do so, but they only open accounts for companies that are already operating. At the same time, just telling them, hey guys, I'm a good person, I will definitely be doing business, is not enough for them. They ask, give us a commercial lease agreement. Don't have such a agreement, that's it, goodbye. You are either a non-operating company or a company working from home. We don't open accounts for such companies. We're not interested. So if you exclude all these kinds of banks, it turns out there really isn't much choice. You'll end up going to one of three banks, those that open accounts for everyone, including non-operating companies. Out of these three banks, two banks open accounts for everyone, including programmers, real estate agencies, and others from this so-called prohibited list of business activities. And only one bank, Lauchen, does not want programmers and everyone else who is on such a list. So, in principle, on the one hand, there is a problem. If you state in your charter that you are a programmer, then Lauchen Bank will not open an account for you. But at the same time, you can go to the other two banks, and it turns out that there is no problem. So I don't even know how to put it exactly. Is there a problem or not? It's as if she simultaneously exists and doesn't. What options are there for those who want to become programmers, designers, and so on? There are actually two options. The first is to specify the type of activity you will actually be engaged in. Note, I'm referring to active companies, those operating. If your company is inactive, you can write anything. You won't be doing business. Just write trade and don't complicate your life. If your company will be active, then the first option is to indicate your actual activity, and later, when you get your residence permit and reach the stage of opening a bank account, simply go to one of the two banks that have no problem opening accounts for companies with this profile. The second option is to specify any other type of activity, for example, trade. Then, when you open the bank account, simply prepare a set of documents to change the type of activity. Do it through the central register. We provide such services, change the business activities. The additional costs for changing the type of activity are about 200 euros, maybe a little less. So that's basically all I have for today. Goodbye, everyone.